Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to look at Chapter 12, Part 1. It's going to focus on classical forms. One of the main important genres in classical music is a theme and variations. And we would see this form lots of times in the second movement of symphonies or piano sonatas, or a theme and variations could be an individual or independent piece amongst itself. And what composers would do is they would pick a theme or a melody that's very, very popular in the classical period, maybe a popular aria from an opera, maybe a famous tune or a folk tune. The idea is you want to pick a tune that everyone knows. Or if you're going to create your own tune, you want to keep it very simple, or the harmonic and melodic material very, very simple, because you're going to eventually vary it and make it more complex. So our example, of course, is Mozart's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, okay? And he writes this piece for solo piano, and it's the theme will get presented first, and then he'll have 12 subsequent variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And in each variation, what he's doing is he's altering the song in a specific way. Maybe he's playing in an octave. Maybe he's playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in a minor mode. Each variation is going to be somewhat different. You'll be able to recognize Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but it's going to be altered. And the goal of theme and variations is to show, for the composer to show the listener how creative and how talented that they can be. Let's go listen to the beginning theme. In this slide, we're going to listen to the main theme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and several of its variations. So the main theme is going to sound like this. The first variation is going to be a little different. It's going to sound like this. So with the variation, you can still hear Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It's just altered. The right hand is now playing, is very, very active and kind of dancing around the main melody. Let's listen to variation number 2. In this variation, again, the harmonies are very active, especially in the left hand of the piano. And what's going on is the left hand of the piano is playing what we call an Alberti bass. Variation number 3 is going to sound like this. This variation is a little bit different because Mozart's focusing on the harmonies rather than varying them with melodic material. So the harmonies are going to be arpeggiated in the right hand. Variation number 4 is going to sound like this. And if you can hear, variation 4 is using all the arpeggios, but they're in the left hand while the right hand is playing the melody. And finally, variation number 5. The next piece we'll look at is a piece by Franz Joseph Haydn. Haydn was a very, very important composer in the classical period, and we're going to look at his 94th Symphony. we're looking, and it's called The Surprise Symphony. And here we have a newspaper review of Haydn. Herr Joseph Haydn, the darling of our nation, whose gentle character is marked in each of his pieces. His compositions have beauty, order, clarity, and a fine and noble simplicity. So that was a newspaper review in 1776. So continuing talking about symphonies, we're going to look at Haydn Symphony number 94. And just like the typical symphony in the classical period is going to have 4 movements. And we'll see here the form of each movement. The first movement is always in sonata allegro form, okay? And it's very dramatic, it's serious, and the tempo is always fast. The second movement is usually always the slow movement of a symphony. In this case, it's a theme and variations. As you can see, it's highlighted here. Sometimes the second movement will be a ternary form. The moods usually very lyrical, and the tempo of a second movement for a classical symphony is always slow. The third movement is always going to be a minuet and trio in the classical period. Okay, it's usually a moderate type of tempo, and the minuet and trio it's a dance, usually associated with the aristocracy, and it's usually light and elegant, and it's, sometimes it's spirited. Finally, the fourth movement in a symphony is going to be a sonata allegro form or rondo or theme and variations. The tempo of the final movement is usually fast as well. So it's usually the fast movements or the first movement and the fourth movement kind of as like the end caps to a symphony. Now we're going to look at the second movement to Haydn's symphony, and the second movement is a theme and variations. Continuing talking about Haydn's 94th Symphony, the symphony has a nickname called the Surprise Symphony, and it's associated with the second movement. And the second movement is also in an andante tempo, or a moderate tempo. Now, Haydn was probably one of the most first composers to use the theme and variations form in a symphony. Okay, and when this symphony premiered, the audience loved it. They cheered. They actually demanded that this movement be played again. The theme is basically it's a simple kind of motive, which is good for theme and variations because you want to start simple and then each variation you get more complex. And the theme is divided into 2 sections, an A section and a B section, which is typical of a lot of classical themes. Lots of times the A section is going to go from the tonic harmony and then move to the dominant harmony. And then the B section is going to start from the dominant harmony and go back to the tonic harmony. So let's go listen to this theme. The A section is going to sound like this. And now the B section is going to pick up and sound like this. Now that we heard the main theme, let's start listening to the variations. The first variation is going to have the main theme being played in the violins, but the first violin section is going to have a counter melody above the theme. Let's listen. The second variation is going to go from a major key and it's going to be played in a minor mode. And that's a typical variation that composers will do. They always usually, if the theme is in a major key, they'll have a shift to a variation in the minor mode. Let's listen. Continuing, we go back to, in variation number 3, we go back to the major mode, and we see a lot of repeated notes played in the oboe. Let's listen. Continuing, variation number 4. The theme is very, very ornamented, and it's using the entire orchestra now. Let's listen. And then finally, the coda is going to sound like this. So this concludes Chapter 12, Part 1. We just talked about the variations on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for piano by Mozart, and we also looked at Haydn's Surprise Symphony, the second movement. Now, what I want you folks to do is go back on Canvas, and I want you to listen to both of the pieces through their entirety, and listen to the variations and how Mozart and Haydn are both, they're varying the melodies and how they're manipulating the harmonies and melodies and so forth. Thank you very much, and make sure you guys watch Part 2, which is coming up next.